Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. Yeah, it is. How are you doing tonight? Um, it's Monday the 21st of July, and it's 10:03 p.m. And tonight I want to do a podcast on, um, I guess you could say it's on another podcast, an interview I saw that Jimmy Dore do with a woman who had been put into the MK Ultra program in 1955 at the age of 6 by her parents, of all people. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this tonight. Now, I've had a tremendous amount of experience, direct first-hand experience in my life with people who have been through these programs. It's almost like I magnetize them somehow. And that to me is generally a karmic pattern. And that to me generally tells me that I was in a similar position in the near past. Okay? Because there's just too much overlay and too much in common, I guess you could say. So I've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. John Edmonds of Stardust Ranch was a first-generation super soldier, which should immediately give you some insight into the ranch and what was going on there. And how perhaps it wasn't as organic as one might be led to believe just seeing John interviewed or reading the book. Now, we decided to leave this out of the book. Although now that John is passed, I think it's an important thing to talk about and discuss. And then there was another friend of mine, another John, who came up here and lived for a while. And then I met a couple other people who had been through various permutations or versions of the MK Ultra program while I was writing the articles detailing the exploits and tragic practices of the galactic historian. So I'm going to begin by just sort of going through the interview because Dr. Juliet Engel brought a lot of information. This is a result of an interview, a video that Santo sent to me. Santo Cavallaro, a friend of the show. And I didn't watch it at first because, believe it or not, I get a lot of recommendations from people on things to watch. You know, people are always sending me stuff. Oh, you should watch this, Bruce. It corroborates what you say on your podcast. And I watch 2 minutes of it and I go, yeah, I know this. I saw this 10 years ago. And I get a lot of that. So I don't always, in fact, I very rarely will take a look at something that somebody sends me. Generally, everything I'll crack open and look at for 15 seconds. And if I can fairly easily figure out where they're going with it, and if it's material I've covered before, I generally won't watch it. No offense. And by all means, continue to send me stuff. I will watch it for 15 seconds. I will tell you what I think about it. But Santo followed up a couple times and he said, "Have you watched it?" I said, "No." He goes, "You should really watch this." Okay, Santo. And then, I think there was a third time where he said, "Have you watched it?" And he wanted to discuss it. And I said, "No, I haven't watched it." And then so finally I sat down to watch it, and there was something just about the way the woman spoke and the way she was addressing the topic that I had a strong intuitive sense that there was going to be new information about this program and its scope and its prevalence. And I realized watching this interview that there was something that I had failed to incorporate into my thinking and my perception in the modern era. And that is the high number of people who are operating from engineered consciousness. Okay? And I choose that word very deliberately. Engineered consciousness. Okay? And so that's what we're going to get into. So this interview featured Jimmy Dore. He's a stand-up comedian, and he's got the Jimmy Dore Show, popular podcast. I don't really watch it that much, but in fact, I hardly ever watch it. But on this particular instance, I decided to watch it. Sorry, I gotta get this going right here. So the lady's name, and I will put the video underneath my podcast tonight. It's about 52 minutes, and you should give it a watch if you want to know more about this topic. And it's worth knowing about because this is the world we live in. Okay? So the video is on Dr. Juliet Engel's personal experiences with MK Ultra and Monarch. And I should say that these are early versions of engineered consciousness. Whatever they're using now is, I think, much quicker, much more effective. And then we get into the work of Dr. Jack Kruse, the blue light technology in our computer screens and things like this, right? And Dr. Engel's narrative is the basis of an emotional and impassioned approach to this topic, having been grappling with it her whole life. And by grappling with it, once it's in you, it's very difficult to get out. Okay, it's like I'm not even sure you can get out of these programs. I don't think the closest I've ever seen anyone come was I think he was American, not British, but yeah, an American gentleman by the name of Max Spears. And he ended up dying in a very unusual circumstance. Many people think he was killed. But Max was getting close. And other than that, I don't think I've ever seen anyone come out of these programs. I don't think I've ever seen them recover their consciousness. It's not to say that it can't be done. It's just I've never seen it. Okay? So, in the case of Dr. Engel, it was a forced recruitment through family Okay, and this is another haunting aspect of this whole phenomenon, is how many times people will offer their own children to the program. Which, I mean, I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, I spoke about John Edmonds about it. I said, "Why would your parents do that?" And if I remember correctly, John said something to the effect of, in the families, in the intelligence agencies, offering a child to the programs is like getting someone in the family who has access to more information and privilege in the overall system, and that there's a belief in these circles that the end justifies the means, meaning that the successful candidate in these arduous, in fact, torturous programs will be a kind of superhuman. You could say that in these circles, the product of these conditioning programs, these consciousness engineering programs, is their version of enlightenment. Now, objectively speaking, it's not enlightenment. It has things in common with enlightenment, but it is not enlightenment. So, John Edmonds also came from a prominent family. Most of his siblings and many people in his extended family, cousins and such, were very well-to-do New York lawyers, and most of his family went to Harvard. So, yeah, I just had to take a quick break there. So, you got John Edmonds in the program, and when you spend a lot of time with these people, at least with me, there's a kind of you could say they kind of rub off on me, or I osmotically pick up some of their consciousness. It's just a kind of a talent or an ability that I have. One second, I've just got to check these dogs here. Holy spumoli. Something going on there. I don't know. There's a stray dog around or something. I got one dog off, but I can't go out and get him because it's like pitch black out, and then I got the female. She's just barking and barking and barking there. It's a bit distracting when you're trying to podcast, but I'll do my best. And never a dull moment up here, man. Never a dull moment. So, like Dr. Engels, John Edmonds was offered into the programs by his family. Okay? Now, Dr. Engels states that she was sold into the MK Ultra program by her father in 1955. And she was 6 years old. So this was, to her sensibilities, a betrayal. And when she did the interview, she was 72 years old, so, which is just last week. But there's a profound sense of betrayal. I got to deal with this. Yeah, back again. So the dog came back. So, her, she had, throughout the interview, she had a sense of profound betrayal. She expressed betrayal by her family. And she pointed out a kind of spiritual corruption in the family. So she didn't think she was being put into an enlightenment program, or reviewing her life at the age of 72 and looking at everything that she'd been put through. She didn't think it was anything special. In fact, she thought that it was a very negative experience. Now, her family were actively involved in the CIA and the NSA. And she did say as well that I think her father or her grandfather was one of the founders of the NSA. I'd have to rewatch the interview, but let's just say that there were multi-generational connections to intelligence agencies and their clandestine activities, which raises questions about these families and their willingness to sacrifice their own children. Okay? So then there's the nature of the abuse and the mind control techniques. And this, of course, I don't have to spend too much time on. I think most of us have heard these stories. It's the same list of things all the time. Litany of abuses, physical, sexual, and mental. And she says that these are not random acts of violence, but deliberate methodologies designed to achieve specific outcomes. So, and the outcome is the creation of externally controlled individuals, or Manchurian candidates. And then she goes on to talk about satanic ritual abuse. So there's satanic rituals, or what she calls satanic rituals. And this is often heard from people in the programs. Now, whether they're actually practicing Satanists or the occult nature of these things are meant to further inform a kind of deeper captivity in the mind of the person, by bringing in religious mythology. It could be all, I guess, sort of psychological. Now, in the context of mind control, the use of rituals, particularly those involving fear, trauma, and perceived occult power, are used as a means to further dissociate victims and entrench programming. Very disturbing stuff, I gotta be honest with you. I'm not extremely comfortable going over this stuff, but nonetheless. Now, she talked about a sex magic division, and she claims to have been part of it. And it involved sexual abuse combined with the teaching of projecting sexual energy to control others. And, of course, this adds another dark layer of manipulation and suggests the exploitation of basic human drives for coercive purposes. Now, you could make the case that the whole world is being subjected now to this sex magic, and it's an affectation of the culture that we've evolved in the West, which not everybody follows. I don't think that it's really been a good thing for a number of decades now. It really, for me, starts in the 70s. The utility of sex to influence the thinking and behavior of people. And I think in a civilized society, it wouldn't be allowed. And so you could, if you want to be really hard-nosed about this, you could extrapolate from what I just said that in this regard, I find the Islamic world more civilized. And when we look at a country like Iran and we talk about the way they treat their women and the theocracy running the country, we always do it from the perspective of this heightened female perspective in the West, right? This third wave feminism we're now immersed in. And it inflames the liberal ideologies of the West, that, oh my God, they're not letting their women do what? And we're so invested in this now that you can generally get a population to go to war over what we perceive to be mistreatment of their women. And we never really address that mistreatment of women in the West. And we're basically pimping our women now. The government, I mentioned this before, the government is officially a pimp now. They're collecting income taxes on girls in Canada and the United States who work on OnlyFans. You have to pay tax on that revenue, on that income, right? So, given that the government is taking tax for that income, the government has officially made itself a pimp, right? A pimp is somebody who lives off the avails of sex work. Okay, now typically it's a male protector on the streets, but it's now a digital pimp in the form of the U.S. government and the Canadian government. Now, let me tell you, when you've got governments pimping their own women, selling the sexual services of the women of that society, how can you look me in the eyes and tell me that we have a problem with Islam and it's a theocracy and we need to invade these countries because they're limiting the rights of their women? And again, going back to some of the things I've said in past podcasts, referencing useful idiots like Margaret Atwood, Gilead and The Handmaid's Tale, and the incredible investment in a woman's right to have an abortion, and Margaret Atwood's preoccupation with a male patriarchal society controlling a woman's body. Well, I'd say we've gone, and by the way, to be direct, if you put it to me that way, I agree with Miss Atwood. Okay? It's just that the point I'm trying to make is that in context of the world we're living in now for women, it doesn't seem as relevant anymore. It doesn't, to me anyways, seem to be the greater injustice being done to women. The greater injustice being done to women is convincing them that there's something that they're not, and convincing them that their greater happiness is finding a role and function in the commercial enterprises of our society rather than investing their energies and their natural abilities somewhere else other than the workforce. And they doubled the tax base. They doubled the revenue coming into the coffers by getting the women into the workforce. And then they get another group of people who are the professional childcare people. And these are people who get specialized education in daycare or Montessori. I believe it's called early childhood development. It's a degree program. And then those people who work in that field for taking care of children, they then get their income taxed as well. So when you look at all the revenue that the government is making off of the family, it's really kind of mind-blowing. Okay? So let's say you've got two people in a family. I'll do Canada. Let's say you've got two people in a family, and they're both making $100,000. They're going to be taxed at about 40%. So right off right out of the gate, there's about $80,000 leaving that family. Now let's say they've got two kids, and they pay $2,000 a month per child in daycare, and that's not an unusual sum. Okay, so $2,000 per child is $4,000 a month, times 12 months is $48,000. So of the remaining $120,000 from the $200,000 gross income coming into the house, you're already down to about $70,000 in disposable income. And that's just to pay the government. Now, of that $48,000 that goes to the daycare center, the government will claw back another 30% of that in income taxes and various business taxes for the Montessoris and for the daycares. Now, it's very important that it be characterized this way, because people don't see it this way. We've been conditioned to see everything through the lens of rights. And we don't realize and pull back and get a larger picture and a clearer context that you could do much better financially if men and women cooperated with each other and one of the parents stayed home and took care of the children, and you didn't have to worry about the daycare, and then you didn't have to worry about that second income. Okay? But it's just, you cannot convince people anymore. Now, you know who does do it the old-fashioned way? All the immigrants. Okay? Most of the Latin people coming into North America from Latin America, they will still do some form of traditional family. Most of the Middle Eastern and Arabic and Muslim families, the women for the most part will stay at home. Second generation, no. This is another interesting thing too, is this: the society gets everybody. You can come over to Canada as Muslim immigrants, and the first generation to emigrate, the mother and father, they will probably live the traditional life. The father will go out and work, and the wife will stay at home and take care of the family. Now, I had a lot of Muslim friends. Remember, I danced with the Sufis for a year. So I got to meet a lot of Muslim families. And what I noticed was an unbelievable pragmatism. Okay? They don't first of all, the amount of money they save just by the way they prepare food. Okay? But we don't, if you tell a woman staying at home now that she has to prepare the food, well, oh my God. According to Margaret Atwood and her Gilead reality, that's almost a form of torture. That's a form of deprivation, because that's the conditioning in the Western liberal mind, right? But these women would stay at home and they would buy everything in bulk. And when I say bulk, I mean bulk. Like you'll go out and get a bag of basmati rice that's like 50 kilograms, a 6-month supply of rice, which lowers the price completely. And then you buy all your spices. And and then all of the food is prepared in the home. There's no spending money in restaurants. Okay? And if you do it that way, I mean, everything is doable. The only people really supporting the modern economy are just us, the sort of dumb Westerners, right? Now, let's get back to this. I went off on a bit of a tangent there, as I often do on the Talamanca Review. They should call it the Talamanca Tangent, I'll tell you. So we were talking about sex magic, and which has esoteric roots, often associated with various occult traditions. And its alleged integration into a CIA program points to a deep, twisted exploration of human psychology and spiritual beliefs for control. Really, really disturbing stuff. So she describes in the interview, and remember, this is going back to the 50s, so her conditioning probably would have been from about 1955 to 1965, maybe 1970. Maybe till she was about 19 years old. She started when she was 6 years old in 1955. So till she was about 21 years old. Now, they have this thing called the spinning wheel and disassociation. And so they tie the children to a spinning wheel and subject them to chants like there is no day, there is no night. And all of these dualistic expressions, there is no man, there is no woman. There is no black, there is no white. And all of the expressions as she described them were dualistic. Okay? And this technique is designed to induce severe disorientation and sensory deprivation. And it breaks down the victim's perception of reality, and it creates an extreme dislocation. And dislocation is not good. The extreme disassociation. Now, disassociation is a key psychological mechanism in mind control. And what it does is it allows handlers to create compartmentalized personalities, or what are called alters, that can be programmed and triggered independently. Now, her claim was that she was involved for 11 years from age 6. No, she didn't go to 21. She went to about 17. And this gives you a sense of the scope and the amount of time it takes to embed all this programming. And it highlights the prolonged and systematic nature of the alleged abuse. And it indicates a sustained effort to mold and control a subject over a significant portion of their formative years. And it's got to be done in these formative. This is the old way. This is a version of what John Edmonds went through. Okay. Now we're getting into the aspect of the interview that I guess it's not that I never thought about it before. I somehow I didn't put it together, or maybe I did and I just didn't want to admit it to myself. I don't know. But this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about why do this? Why create controlled individuals? Why create mind-controlled individuals? Well, the overarching purpose of these brutal techniques, according to Dr. Engel, was to create individuals who could be externally controlled and essentially becoming programmed assets for clandestine operations. And this aligns with the popular understanding and the documented aims of early mind control research, like Dr. Ewan McGregor and things like this. Now, the interview that Jimmy Dore did was timed with the release of a lot of documents from the NSA and the CIA that just became declassified. I think this is done under the Trump administration. A critical element of the interview is the assertion that recently declassified documents lend credence to Dr. Engel's claims. So the December 23rd document release. On December 23rd of 2023, these documents were released, attributed to the National Security Archive. So this is something that we're getting more and more and more disclosure from the government now, but it's a bit stale. So they're telling us about mind control that went on in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're not telling us about the mind control that's going on now, which is much more intense, much more severe, and I believe they've learned how to do it widespread now. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that if you don't live in nature and you don't ground yourself in nature, and you don't have this let's call it a 0 point of regeneration, where you can just forget everything and exist where you exist, I don't think you're going to come out of this. It would take a very special person to be able to come out of this, right? Very special person indeed. So, now, the documents she's talking about are basically the CIA's behavioral control experiments. And this is a broad term that encompasses various forms of manipulation of human consciousness and action. Okay? Now, there's a drug component to this as well. Okay? And this document release confirms the CIA's use of drugs like LSD. And the supplier of the LSD to the CIA was the pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly. And so this is a major pharmaceutical company working with these controversial programs. Now, that's an important thing. So even going as far back as the 50s, you have a relationship between pharmakia and the intelligence community. Okay? Now I want you to speed that up to 2020. I want you to think of mRNA vaccines. I want you to think of everything that's going on now. Okay? And you look at the companies involved. You've got Pfizer, you've got Moderna, you've got AstraZeneca. Okay? And it's all really, so this is what I'm saying, and this is the mind control program has gone widespread now. So they can do it to, I think, to anybody. And you don't have to go into a geographic location. You don't have to meet at a building. You don't have to have direct contact with handlers anymore. I think most of it is done now through black screen technology, cell phones, tablets, computer screens, televisions, right? And I think Dr. Cruz is telling us the truth with the blue light. Now, why, I guess, is what the question becomes. But before we get to there, let's just get a little more detail on the actual mind control. So hypnosis, it's also confirmed in the documents. Isolation and sensory deprivation. Now, these extreme techniques are mentioned as confirmed, designed to disorient and break down an individual's psychological state, making them more susceptible to manipulation, and experimentation without consent. So these experiments were conducted on human subjects, often without their knowledge. And it highlights the profound ethical violations inherent in these programs. And these people were used as unwitting test subjects. So you got project code names, MK Ultra, Bluebird, Artichoke, and these are all CIA mind control programs. Now, there was a destruction of records as well. A critical piece of information cited from the documents is that many original records were destroyed in 1973 by CIA officials. And this act of destruction is consistent with historical accounts, and it's often seen as an attempt to cover up the most egregious aspects of these programs, making full accountability and understanding incredibly difficult, if not impossible, unless you can get a living witness. But and by the way, people died in these programs. Dr. Engels says that a lot of the children were killed, and like literally killed, as a form of shock therapy for the other children. She was not killed because she was a bloodline child. She's coming from the intelligence community's families, right? But the other kids who end up in it, who are not from connected families, many of them die. So here we have another example of children being killed. Why have we been so invested in children and harming children in so many different ways since the end of World War II? It's a very curious question, and so diabolical. One has to wonder if we really want the answer. Is that really a question you want to have answered? Because you're going to have a pretty strong constitution and a pretty strong connection with God to be able to tolerate some of the darker aspects of these programs, especially as they pertain to the violation of children. Yeah. Now, another interesting aspect of the whole program was the location, and these experiments and the processes they had to go through were conducted in hospitals, universities, and what they call clandestine safe houses. Now, the involvement of legitimate institutions like hospitals and universities, if true, indicates a deep penetration of these programs into society, and the potential complicity or unwitting participation of respected professionals. The continuation hypothesis, a central thesis of the interview with Dr. Engels, is that these programs did not stop in 1973 when the records were destroyed. Instead, they are believed to have become more sophisticated and even more clandestine. This perspective transforms MKUltra from a historical anomaly into an ongoing, evolving threat. And the importation of foreign children. A particularly disturbing speculation is the idea that the programs might involve the importation of foreign children for experimentation. And this expands the scope internationally and suggests an even deeper level of depravity, circumventing domestic legal and ethical boundaries. Now, the gifted and talented education connection. Now, this is so these gifted and talented education programs were a covert version of these programs, and the mind control was right in the education programs, and yeah, I think that's about it. Oh no. So the impact and the broader allegations of societal control. So one of the things toward the second half of the interview, and this is where it gets really interesting. Now, Dr. Engels speculates that there are much wider implications to this than anybody who may have considered. And I was caught off guard as well. So those who run the world as programmed individuals. So Dr. Engel makes a sweeping and highly disturbing claim that individuals who went through these programs are now in positions of power, running the world, and are responsible for current societal craziness. This elevates the conspiracy from individual trauma to global governance, implying that world leaders and decision makers are not acting freely, but are under external control. Now, let me just pull somebody out of a hat here. From everything I know, I've heard, and the research that I've seen, factual, biographical information, I have absolutely no doubt believing that Justin Trudeau was an externally controlled person, that he went through the programs. Just like Dr. Engels in 1955, Trudeau was probably put into these programs around 1976 when he was 5 years old. It's extremely disturbing when you start to think about it, okay? Because it's another example of the disassociation required to perpetrate psychotic social programs on societies, or, in the case of Trudeau, commence the collapse of a functioning society, which is what he did. And Carney's come in to finish it now. Carney is probably another product of the programs. Many of the judges in the court system, many of the senior fellows at universities. This is the thing that Engels gets into in this interview with Jimmy Dore that I never considered before. Like, when I had met these people at a sort of individual and program level, I understood these mind control and super soldier programs. But what I failed to understand was the degree to which they had proliferated. And that it's not just super soldiers, that externally controlled or mind-controlled people are in key positions everywhere. Extremely disturbing thing to contemplate, okay? Now, there are implanted suicide programs in these people should they start to wake up. So a chilling allegation is that remembering suppressed memories from such programs can trigger suicide programs, allegedly implanted in victims, and this acts as a deterrent for victims seeking to uncover the truth, explaining why so many might remain silent, or why their testimonies are often difficult to obtain and verify. It reinforces the idea of total control over the individual, even their will to live. Bloodline families and disassociation. The discussion touches on the idea of bloodline families being targeted for these programs due to a supposed predisposition to disassociation. This introduces a pseudoscientific or esoteric element suggesting a genetic or generational component to mind control vulnerability. And this concept has roots in certain conspiratorial theories that posit specific bloodlines hold power or are manipulated for hidden agendas. Connections to other figures and organizations. Now, the interview briefly mentions figures like Alan Cranston and connections to organizations like the Rosicrucians. This isn't the first time I've seen the Rosicrucians come up in this stuff. Now, the Rosicrucians are an ancillary secret society once or twice removed from the Kabbalah, because all of these secret societies are coming off of the Kabbalah. Do you understand? Okay? This is why I place Judaism at the center of it. Now, again, this doesn't mean all Jews, but it's their material, their understanding of the conscious and unconscious mind that is creating these programs. Okay? So Rosicrucians, I'm sure the Masons are another extension of it. And now Alan Cranston was a U.S. Senator, and the Rosicrucians are a mystical, esoteric fraternity. And Manchurian candidate archetype. The video explicitly refers to the goal of creating Manchurian candidate type agents. This term, popularized by the novel and film, refers to an individual who is hypnotically programmed to perform assassinations or other acts without conscious memory or control. And this provides a cultural touchstone for understanding the alleged ultimate aim of these mind control programs. Overall framing and implication. Power of personal testimony. So that's Dr. Engels, and I'll put the interview in after this. So when you stop and you begin to contemplate, to speculate about the scope of this program, I think at this point it would be legitimate to ask not what's been compromised. I think it's so widespread now that the more specific question is what isn't compromised. It's got to be it's in the military, it's in medicine, it's in education, it's in the civil service, it's definitely in policing. They probably try to get people with this programming in high-level policing positions, police chiefs, police captains, things like this. And has the technology spread all through the world now? I mean, other than the importing of foreign children, has the technology been given to foreign governments? Anyways, that's all I have to say for tonight. A little bit of a disturbing show, but I was profoundly moved by this interview that Santo gave me. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.